And welcome back. We're on the grain trading floor of the CME Group, getting reaction to yesterday's USDA crop report numbers. Joining me now is Dan Bossy, President of Ag Resource Company, and Scott Shellady, Senior Vice President for Derivatives Treen. Thanks for joining us both, and we appreciate it. Let's start with you, Dan. Your initial reaction to those numbers yesterday from USDA.
Well, Mike, the initial reaction was bullish from the marketplace, who was expecting something larger. Our big complaint with the numbers is how NAS backed into them in terms of using a 5-year average year weight and soy pod weights. As we do our tours around the Midwest and our crop team looks at the corn crop in particular, we think those year weights will be more closer to 0.335 or 0.34, which would indicate a corn yield between 159 and 161. But that'll all happen in September and October. That's when we actually can measure ears and pull and see what we have. NAS, of course, under their strategy, pulls ear or doesn't pull ears in August. When it's in blister or dough, they'd make a measurement using the 5-year average, which includes last year's drought, and we think that's just too low.
So you still think that corn crop, is going to be bigger than what USDA is saying at this point?
Big crops get bigger, and we think the number will ultimately be well over 14.
And you don't think that the number of prevented acres and the holes out there in those fields will keep that number down even more?
We don't at this point. Again, as we do as our team's out there measuring and as we're looking at stuff, we're fairly confident. We're using a yield right today of 159. We'll modify that as combines make headway, but no, we think that's the kind of crop that we are seeing, and that's what our research suggests.
It's tough because you tend to judge a whole country's crop by what you see in your own fields, and if you're having, if you have some tougher conditions, it's hard to believe there's that huge a crop out there. But we know there's some very good crops out there, but there is a concern: will they have enough growing season to finish out? Are you looking at that at this point?
Well, Mike, we had 8 states that NAS reported had record corn yields in this number yesterday, and those states stretch from Michigan all the way down to the south. I was down in Jackson, Mississippi a few weeks ago, and corn harvest is ongoing, and they are seeing some big crop.
Mm-hmm.
This crop is behind. We measure it at 8 or 10 days behind normal. If we don't have a freeze by the 25th of September, we think we're in good shape. If we have a freeze before that, we're going to have some difficulties. Now, if we look back in history, the odds of an early freeze before September 15th is about 4%. I'm not sure Las Vegas will give you odds. It always can happen, but it's not the kind of thing I like to bank in terms of our marketing and trading.
We'll talk beans in a moment. I'll bring in Scott Shellady here from the Senior Vice President of Derivatives Team, Treen. Scott, do you agree with that? Do you think that this corn crop is going to be bigger than the 13.7 billion crop that USDA is saying right now?
Absolutely, and to your point earlier, we have our own farm as well, and if I looked out my back window over this kitchen sink, I think it'd be bigger than that. We're in Northwest Illinois, and things look pretty good up there, and I would say, generally speaking, what I can bring as far as the options flows and the flows that we've seen here on the trading floor, we've got a record managed money short. It just got to be a little bit too easy for them. I think that this report kind of gives pause, or if we didn't have the report that we just got, I think we would have been grinding lower to $4. So I think what this will do, we'll take some shorts off the table. We've seen a little bit of a squeeze. We're still 20 cents off that low that we got in D's corn a couple days ago or yesterday before the report, but I ultimately do think that these guys are the managed money, the institutional investor, and the speculator are already discounting that number because we're down 7 cents today, and I think that will continue to be the case. A ton of put buying, a ton of put spread buying, all the way out until the March deferred. So there are still folks that still absolutely wholeheartedly agree with the fact that this crop is going to be getting bigger, not smaller like we got yesterday. But also, number two is that if you do see any bullish plays, generally they have been to cover a massive speculator or investor short in the outright underlying. So still, everything points to me that this crop gets bigger, and I would agree it's well over 14.
So if we're talking about a bigger crop, but we keep hearing about problems in Iowa, which is usually the leader towards a big crop, are we overcoming a traditional, what we usually look at and say, well, Iowa's got to lead the way if we're going to have a huge crop?
Yes, and just from my own experience, when the corn market's higher, they buy you a beer in the tavern in town, and when it's lower, you're the reason why it's lower, and they hate you. I think that what we see, and what the farmers got, and what their break-evens are, I think, generally speaking, across the Midwest, is that we're in a sweet spot here where it's getting a little bit difficult for some of those guys to manage. And I think if we do get a rally, there's stuff for sale because they got to get rid of it. So I think that I think it grinds lower. We're hearing whispers of 380, 350
Really?
walking around the floor. I don't know if it goes that low, but to give folks a reference, there has been a huge interest in buying the $3.80, $4 put spread. So that's what a lot of people out there are thinking. Now, I know as a farmer you don't want to hear that, but
Unless you're a
those are the-
livestock producer, you're buying, right?
right, but that's the reality you have to face.
Dan, are we going to see corn under $4?
Yes.
Really?
I think Scott is dead right. When we start thinking about next year, we only need a 13 billion bushel corn crop. And we look at this report, the Ukraine corn crop was up 3 million tons. Brazil was up 3. Brazil will be the world's largest corn exporter again this year. Their lineup down in Brazil and Paranaguá shows that. As we think forward, there's no demand growth for corn. And so I keep adding to end stocks, 2 billion this year, 2.6 or 7 next year. And until government policy or weather changes that, we're just in a stock building mode. And so producers need to think forward to 14 and 15 crops. I know at our firm, we've always been recommending selling 50% of next year's corn crop and 25% of 15s. It's that kind of landscape.
Okay, let's switch.